In Idaho, with the case against accused killer Bryan Kohberger.
I'm confused because if the defendant's alibi is that he was out driving around that night, I'm not sure what additional information his cell data could add to an actual alibi defense. It seems like what the defense is asking for, and they're being completely upfront about it, and I appreciate that. But what they're asking to do is essentially double check all the discovery before disclosing their alibi, and that's not what the purpose of an alibi deadline is. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
Now we have some more insight, my friends, into where Kohberger claims he was the night of the murders, as his defense team has filed their notice of alibi late last night, claiming that, quote, Mr. Kohberger was out driving in the early morning hours of November 13th, 2022. They go on to claim that cell phone data will show that Bryan Kohberger's mobile device was south of Pullman, Washington, and west of Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022, and did not travel east in the early morning hours of November 13th, and thus could not be the vehicle captured on video along the Moscow-Pullman highway near Floyd's cannabis shop. And perhaps the most important thing about this, they say he was out gazing at the stars. That's right. They say he was stargazing, that he likes to go look at the moon and the stars at night. And that's what he happened to be doing the night that these 4 homicides were committed. What do you think about that, my friends? I've got 2 great guests I'm going to bring in right now to talk about this. They are practicing criminal defense attorneys. We have with us criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Michael J. Brown, and also with us criminal defense attorney and professor Dante Mills. Great to have you both on the program this morning. Oh boy, what do we think the jury will think of this alibi? Dante Mills, would you start us off, please?
Good morning, Julie, Michael. It's interesting that they're coming forward with this alibi information. The concern is, if you're a defendant, right, you're entitled, you're innocent until proven guilty, you're entitled to a defense. If you're a defendant that's saying you're falsely accused, you can't plan where you were going to be when a crime happened that you're saying you didn't commit. So it does sound a little bizarre that they're saying, well, he was out stargazing, but what if he actually was? What if that's something he actually does? And this cell phone data can prove that he never entered into the neighborhood where these kills happened. We have the obligation. If we were jurors on this case, we have to be open-minded. We have to be fair and listen to the evidence. And I think if they can show that through cell phone data, then we have to say maybe he's not guilty, maybe he wasn't there, because if there was cell phone data presented by the prosecution that placed him on that scene, we would absolutely use that to say that he was there. So we have to be open-minded at this point and see how all of this plays out.
Sure. Professor, thank you for that. You said something I want to continue with. You said this may be something that he does, right? You know, you all know it as habit evidence, right? In the courtroom for our wonderful courties at home, this is something that the rules of evidence provide for. If it can be really specific and really particularized, it can potentially come in certain cases. So here, let's take a look at some more of what they said. They're saying here that he has this habit of late night drives. As an avid runner, hiker, he explored many areas after the school year began. Mr. Kohberger was busy with classes and working at Washington State. His running and hiking decreased, but he did not stop. Instead, his nighttime drives increased, and this is supported by the data. This is what Dante was just saying, from his phone, showing him in the countryside late at night or early in the morning on several occasions. Michael J. Brown, I'm wondering if this defense team is going to try to squeeze it in as habit evidence, even though, you know, habit evidence has to be like, you know, my mother, for instance, habit evidence, going to church every morning of the week, you know, habit evidence, like same time, you're going to find her at the mass, you know, that kind of thing. You know, that's where she will be. Your thoughts on this, Michael, please.
Yeah, I think, good morning, Julie. Good morning, Professor. I think it's more about the alibi as opposed to habit. Habit, as you know, has to be habitual. It has to be every single day or so consistent. The alibi issue is really important because I think what the prosecution is going to try to show is they're crafting the alibi to the evidence that the prosecution has, and that's why they're objecting to giving up the cell phone data before they actually file this alibi notice. And alibi notices generally have to be filed promptly, and you have to describe not only the witnesses, but also the location where you allegedly were. But remember now, the arrest was 7 weeks after the alleged incident. And that's important because if I asked you, Julie, or if I asked the professor, where were you 3 days ago, you'd probably have a difficult time recollecting the specifics. Now you're trying to recollect and backtrack 7 weeks prior. So in the defense of Kohlberger, it's tough to develop that. And once they get that evidence and data, it may jar his memory and support where he thinks he was.
Yeah, great points, Michael. Thank you for that. You and Dante are good. I've said it many times on this show. You and Dante, Michael, thank you for that. You and Dante are good. I've said it many times on this show. I've said it privately. If I ever, God forbid, get charged with a crime, I'm calling you two up. So let me bounce off of you. One of the things that I think is most damaging for Bryan Koberger, that he turns off the cell phone during the time that officials say those homicides were committed. So take a look. His phone stops reporting to the network at 2:47 a.m. Police believe those beautiful young children were killed at 4 a.m. 4:25 a.m. is the window they've been able to narrow down, presumably through autopsies and other evidence. Koberger turns his phone back on at 4:48 a.m. And his defense team makes a point in saying in this alibi defense that he is out stargazing that night. He's looking at the stars, and he's even got pictures of the stars on his cell phone. So why does he need to turn off the cell phone if he can't take pictures if it's off? Dante, let me go back to you on this, my friend.
Yeah, you're making us work here as criminal defense attorneys this morning. Listen, when you're out, your phone can die. I mean, it has to be the easy response, right? Very easy. He was out for an extended amount of time, taking pictures, using his phone to view the stars and things like that, and his phone just died. I think that's the easy explanation. I'm sure the explanation that they will use. But again, it's ideal if you're alibi is somewhere where there's tons of people. You can get affidavits from people saying this is where he was, but he can't choose the time that a crime happened. So if he's alone, you have to use what you have. If his cell phone dies, clearly that's an issue because during the time of the murder, there's going to be this blackout on his location. But again, if he's never pinged in that area, if he's pinged in other areas, then you can just say he wouldn't have hacked over here or, use those kind of things. But it's going to be an issue that period is blacked out.
Welcome back to my mental health and crime channel. My name is Huda London. This is for educational purpose only. This is the case of the Idaho quadruple murders. Bryan Christopher Koberger, his alibi has been submitted in. He said that he was at YY Park stargazing. I wanted to play a previous clip that came out in the beginning of a guy who knows Bryan Christopher Koberger in Pennsylvania, and he said that he used to take jogs and runs with him at night. So it does show in his behavior that he is a night rider. Whether he's going stargazing or whether he likes jogging at night remains to be seen.
Been able to uncover.
Well, Nicole, we're starting to get a better picture of Bryan Koberger through online and other records, but also from someone who says that he knew Koberger, our affiliate in Pennsylvania, speaking with a man who says that some years ago he ran with Koberger on a regular basis. Listen to his reaction to the news that Koberger was arrested and charged for these murders in Moscow, Idaho.
I used to go on night runs with him because, I didn't want to go. I used to go on night runs with him because, I didn't want to go running at night by myself. So I would text him, hey, you want to go for a run? We'd go for 6-7 mile runs at night. So, when I saw what it was, I was just in, complete shock. I'm still kind of, shaking knowing about that. It's just unreal to think somebody could actually do that to somebody. It's absolutely, mind-boggling. My adrenaline's still kind of running after finding the information out. So, just, I feel for the families, and I'm just happy justice can be served now, so.
that Koberger studied criminal justice at an advanced level, having gotten a master's from DeSales University in Pennsylvania in 2022, according to the school there. He appears to once have posted on Reddit asking for volunteers for a research project where he was studying the criminal mind, and he wanted to know specific things about the emotional and psychological considerations for people who had been convicted of crimes, asking questions in a survey like, why did you choose that victim? What was the first move that you made? How did you leave the scene? So very eerie, knowing he is now accused of going through all those thoughts, having committed 4 murders, according to police. Now, he is currently a PhD candidate in criminal justice at Washington State University in Pullman, which is very close to Moscow, Idaho. A friend telling News Nation that he went to Pleasant Valley High School in the area near the Poconos. This is near that scene where he was arrested this morning. A news article from the local paper and school district documents tell us that he later worked there as a security guard. So a strange background for someone to now be accused of such gruesome crimes. Now, we also were able to confirm through county records out in Idaho that someone of the same name, same age, so it appears to be this suspect Koberger, had been stopped on a seatbelt violation in August. So if these charges against him are true, that means that he would have at least been in the Moscow, Idaho area at least twice.
So we clearly have a person saying that he's to take long runs with Brian Christopher Koberger in his hometown, Pennsylvania, at night. Koberger's alibi says clearly that he went to YY Park for stargazing. It just shows us that he's a night rider. For whatever reason he goes out at night, he does. So I hope they bring this witness to the court case, and I hope he can testify with his behavior. Brian Christopher Koberger doesn't have a criminal record at all. I find it baffling that someone who's never had a criminal record, who's never been offender, decides to go all the way to Idaho, Moscow to commit a brutal, horrific quadruple murders when he knows that Idaho has the death penalty. This doesn't make sense to me.
We call you Catherine. What do you like to go by?
Catherine's fine. You can call me Catherine.
Dr. Catherine Ramsland, an expert in serial killers who teaches at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. We're learning one of her students was Bryan Koberger, the man now charged with murdering 4 University of Idaho students. I'm Anjanette Levy, and welcome to this special edition of Law and Crime Sidebar Podcast. 28-year-old Bryan Koberger is being held without bail at the Monroe County Jail in Pennsylvania on those murder charges. He was arrested at his parents' home on Friday morning just before 2 a.m. Moscow police say they seized a 2015 white Elantra but have offered few other details. Koberger faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary and will have to be extradited to Idaho to face charges for the murders of Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Police executed a search warrant at Koberger's apartment in Pullman, Washington, Friday. Koberger was a PhD student at Washington State University, studying criminal justice and criminology. Washington State University is about 10 miles from Moscow, Idaho, where those murders were committed on November 13th. A spokesperson for the university said Koberger had just completed his first semester in the program. Before WSU, spokesperson for the university said Koberger had just completed his first semester in the program. Before WSU, Koberger was a master's student at DeSales University in Pennsylvania. And one of his professors was Dr. Catherine Ramsland. She teaches classes in serial killers. She's a forensic psychologist, and she has actually appeared on some of Law and Crime's podcasts, including Sidebar and Cocktails and Cocktails. This is what she told Sean Stix Larkin about her work earlier this year.
I actually consult on death investigations. I do police trainings. I talk about profiling and psychological autopsy, which is really about suicidology. So I have a whole class just in that. And I have a class in dangerous minds that I teach at the undergraduate and graduate level, and that is really about extreme offenders, which is mass murderers, spree killers, and serial killers. So that's primarily what I do most of my work on, and most of what the students want from me. That class fills up very quickly.
I actually spoke with a student who was in that serial killer class with Bryan Kohberger, and he told me that Kohberger often interrupted Dr. Ramsland, talking over her as if he knew more about the subject matter than she did. Now, in that interview with Sean Stix Larkin, Dr. Ramsland talked a little bit more about how she became interested in studying serial killers.
It chose me more than I chose it, but I love it. I think it's really interesting, and I'm constantly finding new ideas, new motivations. You know, we have formulas related to serial killers, but for example, I spent 5 years talking with Dennis Rader, the BTK serial killer, because he defies many of the formulas. So I thought that was interesting. I wanted to know more about that. And I think I'm always looking for the outliers rather than the ones that fit the mold. I want to see the ones that don't fit the mold, and how did they get to be the way they are. And in psychology, as opposed to criminology, we're looking more at the cases, the individual details of someone's life story, and the trajectory, basically. Whereas in criminology, you're looking more at groups and trends and statistics and things like that. I'm much more interested in just the case details. So that's why I like talking to people who are willing to explore how they got to be the way they are. And, you know, I can spend many hours doing that. So I didn't choose it, but I'm really happy I'm in this field.
I personally think that people are taking Bryan Christopher Kohberger's research quite serious and are judging him for that. But let's not forget that he did his bachelor's in psychology and his master's in crime and justice and his PhD in criminology. So the questions he was asking in his research, that was actually granted permission by DeSales University in Pennsylvania. He just wanted to deal with people who have been ex-cons, ex-prisoners, and he wanted to basically read their minds and see what brings them to this thought process of committing a violent crime. So if his research was not granted by his university, then it would have been illegal. And that's the part people are not paying attention to. The research was signed by his university.
Thought they heard Kaylee playing with her dog, a pet which featured prominently in her videos. This camera near the house recorded sounds of a disturbance. Court documents say voices or a whimper were heard, followed by a loud thud at 4:17 a.m. One of the survivors even caught a glimpse of a man in the house, noting his bushy eyebrows and tall athletic build as he walked past her to this back door. Police initially hunted for a white Hyundai, spotted fleeing the murder scene at high speed. They finally found an identical car here, belonging to postgraduate student Bryan Kohberger.
I spoke to one of Koberger's neighbours here at his university accommodation in Pullman. He didn't want to go on camera, but said he frequently saw Koberger in the company of an Asian girl, often laughing and joking. On the night of the murder, he saw him right out here, acting normally.
Analysis of mobile mast data showed Koberger's phone was turned off around the time of the killings. It also showed he'd driven past the house late at night repeatedly.
A car matching Koberger's was spotted 4 times, loitering around the murder scene for 51 minutes before heading off at high speed. It was then picked up on these back roads, again by cameras, heading towards Pullman, where he lived.
Just over a month after the murders, Koberger and his father were briefly stopped by traffic police in Indiana while driving 2,500 miles across America.
I'm having a hard time hearing you because of the traffic. So you're coming from Washington State University, and you're going where?
They were unaware the FBI was closing in, going through rubbish at the family home in...
I wonder if the FBI tracked how many cars were driving around the neighborhood that night. And I wonder how many phone devices were pinging around the area of 1122 Kings Road. It could have been anyone driving a white car. The police were searching for a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra. Koberger drives a 2016 Hyundai Elantra. Please share your thoughts, like, share and subscribe. Have a lovely weekend.